So our final keynote is something absolutely worth waiting for, and that's because our next keynote speaker is an alumnus of Harvard Business School and IIM Ahmedabad. He's a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and he's the group head for corporate communications at Reliance Industries. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a massive welcome to Rohit Bansal.
So as Vineet said, Sat Sri Akal, so Sat Sri Akal again. This is Sat Sri Akal. Future-proofing public relations, or for that matter, future-proofing anything, assumes that we know the future. Now, who in his or her right mind can say they know the future? There is a concept called Prospectivism that is about trying to figure out what the future looks like. It was a lot easier when, say, in the 80s, some of us were taking a bet between the Americans and the Russians, USSR as it were. And most of us knew that the US will win, but still there were enough people who argued to the contrary, and some of them switch sides. But today, to say that who is going to win at an international warfare level, or for that matter, taking a bet between the Chinese and perhaps the Americans, is somewhat foolhardy. A very eminent mention was made by Yashaswini on Indonesia. What if Indonesia starts winning? Have we even taken our bets around them? Do we even know enough about the country? Do we even have a handful of experts or speakers on that country? So clearly, ladies and gentlemen, those who say that they know the future, much less the future proofing of public relations, are essentially trying to join the dots somewhat, but not quite, they won't be around when the future actually arrives. So let's, for a moment of honesty, clearly agree on one thing, that we all have to still navigate across very choppy and uncertain waters. We can throw all kinds of acronyms, VUCA being one, and so on and so forth. Now, what if the future is uncertain and future is not known to any of us in this room? What are those clear things that we can still talk about and earn our dinner and the right to attendance in the Euphoria concert and the stuff that lying in the goodies? Clearly, one of the things we can remember is Mr. Charles Darwin. Mr. Darwin told us very, very many years ago, and some of it holds true, that those species who are the strongest or perhaps the smartest may not necessarily win and survive the future. Darwin told us that those species which are the most adaptive will remain future-proof. So, not about the strongest, because the dinosaurs were pretty strong, but they didn't survive. So the most adaptive, perhaps amoeba, could survive and then take other life forms. So without stretching the analogy too much, one of the things you might want to think about during the course of this wonderful converge and sangam of ideas on future-proofing is that, are we adaptive enough? Now, what is adaptation? Adaptation could in many ways be not taking bets, like I said, between the Americans and the Chinese, or even to say that it is India's right to a great destiny. I'm a great believer of India, so are all of us in this room. But, you know, if you go abroad and you talk to enough people in an honest setting, we could be perhaps chastened to believe that not that many people unanimously say that it is India and India alone. So sometimes the ideation around future, I dare say, is often colored by what we want to hear and what we want to see. On the contrary, future proofing could entail not only adaptation and the ability to survive, but also to learn on the go and adapt on the go. So my Indonesian example, which I just thought of while Yashaswini was speaking, is if their language becomes important, what is our adaptability in our organizations and in our professions to quickly learn the language? And if it is technology which is going to drive a lot of winners and losers, the distinction between those who won and also ran, it could well be our ability to learn that language fastest. Conceptually, Brazil is going to win for whatever reason. Is our organization or our community adaptive enough to learn quickly? It is a waste of time perhaps to even try and learn every single language on the planet, just to talk about this example, but to have the ability to catch up and catch up fast could be the reason between survival, growth, and future proofing. So that's another idea you might want to mull about as to how quickly we can catch up with what is actually winning, and the winners can't be predicted as fast as we thought. The other way of looking at it alongside is to also see that as leaders that you are, and you are certainly not only CEOs by title, but you're certainly CEOs of your life. So the moment you were born, ladies and gentlemen, you became a CEO. And it is your ability to be able to enhance your stakeholder value right through your life that will determine how future-proof you are yourself, and at the core of it, therefore, your community or your country or whatever cause you pick up. So in that light, it would be useful to remember that in your group, are you really someone who is giving the direction and hoping that everybody is aligned and therefore going and achieving that goal? Well, a lot of people will say that's what the CEO's job is. That's what a CEO who will future-proof my organization should be doing, or I am doing because I am future-proofing as the leader should. But what if you just got it wrong by a degree and you were running a space mission instead of running some satellite vehicle to maybe Mars? It will land in Jupiter by just a 1 degree change between what you thought would be the trajectory required and what actually happened. So it is also therefore important to remember that in your setting, do you have some outliers? Those people who don't agree, who can think very innovatively, and maybe 5%, 10% people. If all of them start pulling in individual directions, there may be chaos in most situations. But future-proofing your own company or your profession, in this case, the public relations profession, which unites most of us here, it would be important to remember that the CEO will not know. And if the CEO does not know that 1 degree difference in the future, it would be therefore important to have people who are able to take over the micro areas sometimes which need to be navigated. And I don't mean that the leadership can be abdicated each time to people in a group, but sometimes it is required. I mean, let's take an example of a new electric vehicle in the luxury space that's coming up in the next few months in India. And they have 3 founders, and those 3 founders take turns to start leading. So one is, since Tesla was mentioned, is ex-Tesla, and he is the so-called tyrant, if not tyrant, at least the dictator, for a time when product development is required. But now that they have reached the product development stage, the supply chain guy is taking most of the decisions, and the product development guy is receding a bit. And likewise, the group that will ultimately take over the digitization, the marketing, and the communication in November when they come up. So is your culture, is your company adaptive enough to start having micro leaderships that take charge when the need of the hour comes, and not necessarily a central figure who is supposed to know everything and pull everyone in a given direction. So it's about shared leadership, certainly not fractured, but certainly united by the cause and not necessarily the structure. So these are some of the things that might future-proof our lives, which at the moment are extremely governed by the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity that was spoken about in the earlier sessions. I don't even know if there's a room for some questions and bonding and interaction, but fundamentally I would like to take a stop here and let Amit tell me, does he want to carry on with this or... Okay, so he basically, just to bring him in, couldn't find the Olympic gold medalist, Mr. Abhinav Bindra. So he said ki tum aa jao and you start firing something and something will happen. So you have to be kind to me. Mr. Bindra, of course, is a legend and he inspires us. He works very closely with the Olympic movement, and so do we in the Reliance Industries. We are trying to, we are getting the Indian Olympic Committee and the International Olympic Committee to come together for a great meeting in Bombay around March of next year. But I was looking forward to hearing him instead of hearing myself and my own voice. But that said, the core thing, if you forget everything, it's fine. But if you just remember one through line, that the smartest idea needn't come from the leaders of the future. And the smartest ideas are often the outlier ideas. So have a methodology inside your head and your cultural context to be able to not only hear and encourage, but also see if some of those ideas can be developed in parallel. Not necessarily at the contradiction of the central mission, but put in some capacities on the sides to keep working on a world that might suddenly need those ideas very, very quickly. You can call it crisis management in advance, but it's not necessarily that. It should be pretty much part of a future survival kit that would be very useful. The business of dogma and being able to therefore say that I know and therefore I believe again comes to question. Because if you think a little bit deeply here, the people can always say, this is what my boss wants to hear. So therefore, this is what I must say. And when I say this, there is incentive. He or she listens to me more carefully. I get more floor space. And therefore, others start doing the same thing. So it's important as leaders that all of you are of your lives and in micro cultures, your own family culture as well as work family culture, to keep a space in your own head to start questioning some of the stuff that you always think is already sorted out and already taken as read or taken as believed. Because the way things are going with technology and disruption, you may well be in for a rude surprise if you are too stuck. And to bring it back to the foreign policy analogy of the USSR and India and America on the other hand, what if we had retained bipolarity as one of our only methodologies? Today we remain in communication with China, irrespective of what they do. We do overfly our Western neighbor when we need to. And we do open a dialogue on the military channels as and when we have to, because we are, joined by geography. We talk to Sri Lanka. We talk to Nepal. Nepal may have a certain, proclivity, increasingly so in the new generation, with their own northern neighbor and their interests there. Does that mean we get sullen? Does that mean we just leave them to their devices? No, we remain engaged and we remain respectful of the fact that they may have interests which have evolved from the time of the Indo-Nepal Treaty of 1950. So I think similarly in ideation pipeline or future-proofing goals, we have to as dogmatic as possible is always helpful, because then you are able to, bringing me back to my first sentence, which is adaptability. We come back to adaptation. And this is not for a moment to say that we should have no views, no spine, we should be like amoeba, not the least. I hope the context of being able to see that the future belongs to those who are less dogmatic, more open to new ideas, quickly their reflexes set in, and they are willing to listen to the counter view and adapt to it to the betterment of or the fulfillment of the mission on hand, are the ones who will future-proof. So coming quickly to the PR profession, the future-proofing of public relations, as Amit Bhai wanted me to speak on. Even if we don't know the future, we know that public relations is here to stay. Whether public relations professionals are here to stay or not is a different matter. Public relations will always stay. Someone else will start doing a better job than us. So if someone else is going to do a better job, the profession will stay. And therefore, the ability to innovate, to be able to put ourselves in the feet of the leaderships that we serve, or the mission statements that guide our companies, is very important. And that is evolving as we talk. It's no longer about column centimeters or the ratings that the TAM delivers, or even for that matter, com scores and so on and so forth. It's that invisible value add which our stakeholders either believe that we provide or we don't. And it is highly interdisciplinary, and unfortunately, a lot of people think that in the corner office think that it's about common sense, and if we only had the time, we could do it ourselves, and PR professionals will not be needed. But thankfully, they don't have all the time, and thankfully, therefore, they have space for us, and for us to therefore start thinking very hard as to what value we are bringing, not only what we think we bring, but also measurable, mathematical. Some of us say, ये भी कोई बात हुई, कोई measure कर सकता है public relations को. But I think the way technology is going, the way listening is more and more scientific and sometimes algorithmically manipulated, it's always useful to be able to at least have some back of the mind numbers on what our teams and what our organizations, agencies, if we are agencies, are bringing on the table. And a fat wad of clippings is thankfully, the equivalent of foreign relations in the 1980s. So clearly there'll be more and more professionals of different fields who will be in the business of public relations, for companies, for countries, for communities. And for those of us who are hardcore, as we say, in the public relations domain, being aware that the profession will stay, the need of the country or the community will stay. But if we don't adapt, we'll be pretty much consigned to the list that Mr. Darwin analyzed, will remain pretty much a possibility. So on that somewhat somber note, I would leave you with the idea that please be adaptive, please read up Mr. Darwin, please look at the way in which your own companies are truly being able to demonstrate value, and not necessarily in your own mind, but in the hearts of the actual consumer out there. Have more candid conversations on what people are thinking about the survivability of the PR message or the core message that we want the maximum number of people to understand, and the relevant one at that. And then perhaps we could have future-proofed at least some of the people in this room, and the profession, of course, will remain as it is. Whether we stay or go is a moot point. Thank you.
Thank you so much.